Hello, my name is John DePiro. I'm a volunteer at the Cold War Museum at Vint Hill, Virginia, in the town of Warrington, Virginia. Today we'd like to talk about aircraft fires, and in particular we want to talk about Nomex and its role in managing aircraft fires. Now, coming out of the Korean War, the Army in particular had discovered that fires occurred in about 10% of helicopter incidents, but they accounted for about 80% of the fatalities. So there was a real focus and an effort made to try to understand aircraft fires better. So one of the things that they did is they went down to NASA Langley, and NASA had a gizmo down there. This is kind of a rough drawing of it. It's just a big framework, steel framework kind of a thing. And what it was built for was to train the astronauts. And of course, the problem if you're an astronaut is the last 50 feet of the landing on the moon is where the money's to be made. So they wanted to figure out a way that they could practice landings before they actually showed up on the moon. So NASA built this gizmo, and then they would hang from cables from it the lunar module, and then the pilots could actually practice the landings and do multiple versions of this, dozens and dozens of them, so that when they got to the moon, it was really pretty easy. So after this program wound down, then NASA began to try to figure out what they could do to use that technology. So what they did then is they suspended from a cable a helicopter, and they would swing the helicopter back to the cable was horizontal, release it, the airplane would come down and crash, and they used cameras that could shoot 10,000 frames a second to try to understand exactly what was going on in that fire. And the result of that is that they did a bunch of new innovative things in association with these aircraft fire incidents. So one of those was to start to figure out a way to clothe the pilots better. And so cotton, in most flight suits up until that time, this here is an example of them, were made out of cotton. It was pretty simple stuff. There was rayon and things like that around artificial fibers, but they didn't want you wearing artificial fibers because they're essentially plastic and they melt. And so if you have a fire and it goes up to, flash fire that goes up to 2,000 degrees, all that rayon and nylon stuff would melt on your body, and that would make big problems. So they went to DuPont, and they talked to Wilfred Sweeney there, and he began researching cloths that could tolerate 2,000 degrees. And by 1968, indeed, the military was fielding uniforms now, flight suits, that could tolerate 2,000 degrees. And this here is an example of an early one. They started issuing these in 1968 in Vietnam to the pilots. And it was a two-piece outfit. There was a top and a bottom. And indeed, that they could tolerate 2,000 degrees. And the story started coming of people who survived fires that by all rights should have been fatal. Now, the DuPont people did a lot of testing, and what they found is that if they created a fire scenario, and it would be enough, the damage would be enough to prompt about a 90% third-degree burn on the body, and a dummy wearing a Nomex flight suit would only incur about 30 or 35% of burns as opposed to the 90% of burns. So it was a real game changer. I mean, it was the difference between life and death. So a little later they came out with some other versions of Nomex. This is a one-piece unit. The Air Force liked these a lot. They actually came out with gloves that were made from Nomex as well. And then DuPont really got into the business of clothing race car drivers and clothing firemen, and eventually tankers, Army tankers, but also the Army started issuing these to the people who drove their fuel tankers. So anybody who was in an environment where things could get really hot in a hurry, in a big way, then they began issuing Nomex suits to those guys. So real kudos to Winifred Sweeney from DuPont for having come up with this technology, because a lot of guys alive today because of him. So if you want to see some more, come out and touch and feel some of this stuff. We're at Vint Hill Station in Warrington, Virginia. We'd be glad to have you come out and visit us. Have a good day.